I'm Victoria Marshall with the latest news from the Washington Watch news desk. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court rejected the Biden administration's unlawful attempt at forcing U.S. taxpayers to subsidize its student loan bailout plan. In its order, the court denied an application from the White House to vacate a lower court injunction that prohibited enforcement of its latest student loan bailout program. This comes after the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals granted an emergency request by Republican-led states to prevent the bailout plan from taking effect last month. The Biden administration filed an emergency request with the Supreme Court to lift the lower court's injunction last week. In response to the decision, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey tweeted, "The Supreme Court unanimously upheld our court order blocking Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's illegal student loan cancellation scheme. This is a huge victory for the working Americans who won't have to foot the bill for the Biden-Harris Ivy League bailout." Now, this isn't the first time SCOTUS has rejected Biden's student loan bailouts. Last year, the High Court ruled that Biden's initial student bailout plan was unconstitutional. To sidestep the court, the Biden administration created the Saving on Valuable Education Repayment Plan, which would force taxpayers to pay off student loan debt. Wednesday's decision prevents that program from going into effect. And in other domestic news, a Colorado apartment building has reportedly been overrun by a Venezuelan gang. In a video making its rounds on social media, a group of heavily armed men enter an apartment complex in the Denver suburb of Aurora and break into a unit. The footage was captured earlier this month, shortly before a shootout at the complex severely injured one person and damaged multiple cars, according to a local news station. Residents in the apartment complex say the violence began when a large number of illegal migrants moved into the building. Thousands of illegal migrants have come to Aurora from Denver, a sanctuary city that has received the largest number of migrants per capita across the country, with more than 40,000 new arrivals since December 2022. Now, the story comes as a new study from the Federation for American Immigration Reform reports that last year, U.S. taxpayers shelled out $150 billion in government services and support to help the 20 million illegal migrants currently in the country. And in other domestic news, a new report from the Federalist shows that America's top healthcare systems are now segregating or excluding some patients from life-saving programs based on race. The world-class healthcare system, Cleveland Clinic, runs a minority men's health center and a minority stroke program for addressing numerous medical conditions, including stroke, diabetes, and other stroke risk factors. The stated goal of these programs is preventing and treating stroke in racial and ethnic minorities, and to combat racial disparities in medical outcomes. The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty has filed a civil rights complaint with the Ohio-based clinic. And finally, fallout continues from Facebook founder and Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg's letter to Jim Jordan and the House Judiciary Committee admitting that his company erred by ceding to pressure from the Biden administration to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story and other content. Independent journalist Michael Schellenberger says the letter is proof the FBI illegally interfered in the 2020 election.
The FBI spread disinformation, information it knew to be false, in order to interfere in the election. The FBI warned Facebook, Twitter, and others that forthcoming information about Burisma and Biden was Russian disinformation. The FBI knew that the Hunter Biden laptop wasn't Russian disinformation because it already had the laptop in its possession for 10 months and was spying on Giuliani.
Schellenberg contends the FBI violated the Hatch Act, which prevents federal employees from using their official authority or influence to interfere with the outcome of an election. And those are today's headlines. I'm Victoria Marshall. For more news and commentary, be sure to check out the Washington Stand at WashingtonStand.com and follow us on social media for updates at FRCDC. Up next is Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. We'll see you tomorrow with more news.
From the heart of our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., bringing compelling interviews, insightful analysis, taking you beyond the headlines and sound bites into conversations with our nation's leaders and newsmakers, all from a biblical worldview. Sitting in for Tony is today's host, Jody Heiss.
Well, it is Thursday, August 29th. Good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of Washington Watch. I'm your host, Jody Heiss, Senior Vice President at the Family Research Council and President of FRC Action. All right, coming up on today's program, one of Kamala Harris's latest ads touts her being tough on the border, and all the while it features Donald Trump's border wall in the background. She's just trying to put forth a false narrative. But what we have taking place now in reality is a group of armed Venezuelan gang members in an apartment complex in a Denver suburb. I suppose that footage probably wouldn't work in her ad.
Fortunately, some of these criminal elements have come up with the migrants. It's my understanding that Venezuela does not share criminal histories with the United States, and so it's very difficult to vet them at the border, yet they've been allowed to come in anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to vet them at the border when you're not vetting them at the border. That was Mike Kaufman, mayor of Aurora, Colorado, earlier today on Fox 31 Denver. He was responding to the alleged gang violence there in his city. I'll be discussing what's been happening there in Aurora when I'm joined here in just a few moments by West Virginia Congressman Alex Mooney. We'll also talk about the false narrative that Democrats have been pushing with regard to Kamala Harris and her tough stance on the border. And speaking of narrative pushing, there continues to be a great deal of fallout over the letter that Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg sent regarding the pressure that his company received from the Biden administration to censor speech that didn't fit the narrative that the administration wanted. Well, I'll be joined later in the program by Dr. Bhattacharya to talk about the effects that the censorship had on how America responded to COVID. Very important that viewpoints remain free. We'll be discussing that with him a little bit later. And speaking of free speech, the nation's largest association of Christian communicators has filed a complaint in opposition to the Johnson Amendment. That's a provision in the U.S. tax code that effectively muzzles nonprofits, which of course includes churches. But it muzzles them when it comes to speech that could be potentially considered political. Well, I'll be joined later in the program with Michael Ferris, who's the general counsel of the National Religious Broadcasters, who are now going after the Johnson Amendment. Also on the program today, we'll discuss an effort to get more states in on declaring February 7th through the 14th as National Marriage Week. You may be surprised to hear just how many did so last year. So, as always, we've got a lot coming your way on the program today. Our website, TonyPerkins.com. And as always, tons of resources are available there for you. And at least for the time being, not the least of which is a link to Family Research Council's 2024 election survey. I'm sure you are extremely concerned with the direction our country is headed. And for that reason, we're asking you to take the 2024 election survey. We're asking you to stand for faith, family, and freedom. We're asking you to let us know about the issues that are most important to you during this election season. And you can input your information, your thoughts on that by simply texting the word election to 67742. And we encourage you to do so and participate with us. All right, let's jump into the details of the program today. In the city of Aurora, Colorado yesterday, they confirmed what they refer to as components of the Venezuelan gang TDA and said that they're operating there, but they also said that reports of TDA's influence in Aurora are isolated. Of course, we all know that the statement comes as troubling surveillance footage of that gang, heavily armed men, handguns and the likes, traversing through an apartment complex there in Aurora, the suburb of Denver. That image would probably be more accurate in describing where Kamala Harris is when it comes to the southern border. Now let that sink in. There's a good imagery. where Kamala Harris stands on border security, not standing on the border with Donald Trump's wall in the background, which, of course, she actually used that in an ad. Amazing. But certainly what's happening in Denver is of great, great, great concern, and it in many regards is a direct result of this administration, including Kamala Harris, and their policies on the border. Well, joining me now to discuss this and more by phone is Congressman Alex Mooney. He proudly represents the 2nd District of West Virginia. Congressman Mooney, great to hear your voice. Thanks for joining us.
Sure, great to be with you again.
Well, listen, what's your reaction? We'll start with what's happening in Aurora, Colorado, and move on from there. What's your reaction to it?
Well, let's remind your listeners that the president of Venezuela is an open communist. He despises America and everything we stand for as people of faith and free markets. Even the countries around him, he lost the election just 2 weeks ago. He lost his election, but declared it invalid, won't release the results, and won't leave as president. So clearly he wants to harm America. And you have a completely open border that anyone can go through, drug dealers, criminals, people who want economic asylum. Like, the bottom line is we have a system where people can come here legally. There's ports of entry. A lot of people have come here illegally over the years. But when, criminals, drug dealers, gangs see an open border, a president and Vice President Kamala Harris who refuse to close it, they're going to take advantage of it. And I think this is just the beginning, what you're seeing. I think there are sleeper cells that have come in from Iran and other places. We have Kamala Harris and President Biden have jeopardized our country intentionally. And I did a little research before I called in, Jody. On March 24th of 2021, President Biden said, as reported by the Associated Press, he said, quote, "I've asked her, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, today, because she's the most qualified person to do it, to lead our efforts with Mexico and the Northern Triangle, stemming the movement of so many folks, stemming the migration to our southern border," close quotes. So the mainstream media these days is trying to downplay her role. She was put in charge of this 3 years ago. She is directly responsible for what's happening. It's complete lawlessness and chaos, and it's intentional by the leaders of our country right now.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was getting to by saying what's happening in Aurora and other places is more descriptive of her policy on the southern border than her standing with Trump's wall in the background, which is just unbelievably offensive. But look, you and I both know this is not just happening in Colorado. I mean, even the Venezuelan gang that is in Colorado now, they've got their foothold all across the country, New York and Texas. Right. And we've all seen how this border crisis now literally is making every state a border state. And what we're seeing right now could just be a preview of much more to come. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely it is. They've been pouring in. They continue to pour in. Anybody. And like I said, it's intentional. And they can profit now. They can traffic drugs. They can traffic human beings. They can traffic arms because nobody's protecting our border. So the gangs can get more powerful now, more money. They're not being fought. And, it's a real problem. I think you're going to see it more and more until we close our border. Like, criminals do evil things, but they're not stupid. They know when they can get away with, attacking people and trafficking and gang violence. The only way to stop it is to get tough on crime. So that's what they're doing.
Yeah, get tough on crime, and in this case, get tough on the border. I mean, we've got to stop letting these people come in. It's just, another thing, Congressman Mooney, that is interesting to me is Denver is a sanctuary city, but Aurora, a suburb, is being affected by it. So, we've got to understand that these bad policies don't just impact the sanctuary cities or that type of thing. It spills over into everywhere that it is. And so all of us are at risk of being enormously impacted by the outcome of these horrible policies.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. A sanctuary city invites the crime. I mean, all we're asking for is that if a criminal's arrested, that's an illegal immigrant, it get reported to ICE and they get deported. That's all we're asking for. And look, if Congress would do their job, and, I'm frustrated even with my own party sometimes, as we lack the willpower to enforce our policies. But, we support not giving taxpayer dollars to sanctuary cities. They should not get taxpayer dollars that flow through the federal government. But, you have, we keep passing our spending bills without any restrictions, so they're getting away with this stuff. we should assert ourselves. I think it's critical that we assert ourselves, but while we still have some time to do so. And I was going to mention also, Jody, not only is this issue so important, but the secondary issue is how laws are made in this country. It's a constitutional crisis. You have a president and vice president, Kamala Harris, who think they can just ignore the law. They think that their job as president is to make up the law and do what they want, do whatever they feel like. They're not restricted by what the executive branch is supposed to do, which is only enforce the law. They're openly not enforcing the law. And this is really a question of, we have a law. You're supposed to deport people who are here illegally. That's the law. You're supposed to secure the border. You're supposed to come legally. They simply ignore it. And this is, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. We have a country where we have a process by which laws are made. And for the president to just say, I can do whatever I feel like doing, ignore student debt, not secure the border, that's really a problem for our system of government, in addition to what's happening, of course, with the invasion at the southern border.
And that raises a good question that I hear all the time. Why is there no accountability? Where is the checks and balances between the three branches of government? Why are they not being held accountable to uphold the law?
Yeah, I mean, you and I were there, and the power of the purse is the most important thing invested in the U.S. House of Representatives, where I serve and you served. And our chamber needs to guard that power and make sure that the people who elected us, we use it to restrict the president when they get out of control. And frankly, you're seeing Democrats don't really care, and weak Republicans who are just so afraid of a Democrat-caused government shutdown just cave in and give the Democrats all the money they want with no restrictions. And this is really, it just enables. It's like we're enabling Kamala Harris to have an open border because we don't punish them. The legislative branch really has to stand up for themselves. It's really a constitutional crisis here. The president has just assumed to themselves all these powers they don't have. And the House of Representatives has allowed it because we keep giving them the money. We just shouldn't give them the money. It's really that simple. But,
it really
it's a political battle. Yeah, it's a political battle. Mm-hmm.
It is, and it was an incredible honor serving with you in that capacity, Alex Mooney. Let me ask you this. I wish we had some more time. Of course, Kamala Harris now is trying to give the image that she's strong on the border, blah, blah. We've kind of dealt with that. What do you hope tonight? She's got the interview with CNN. What kind of questions would you hope would be asked of her? And we've got about a minute left.
Oh, just for her to be honest about her extreme positions, that why she didn't secure the border all this time, and then why she supports abortion on demand for 9 months with taxpayer dollars and no parental consent. They are the extremist party when it comes to moral issues. Why they want men beating up on women in sports. Why won't they protect women in sports? She is a radical. She's a complete radical. During the election, she's going to try and reinvent herself as some kind of a moderate like Joe Biden pretended to do. But she's been nothing but an enabler of the most radical agenda this country's ever seen. So I just hope the interviewer doesn't let her get away with vague, non-committal answers or non-answers, and just admit it. Tell the truth. I hope she just tells the truth about her policies, that she supports these radical policies, and let the country make a decision.
Yeah, the American people deserve to know where she stands on all these issues. Thank you, Congressman Alex Mooney, one of my dear friends and great heroes in Congress. Thank you for joining us on Washington Watch. All right, friends, coming up after the break, we've got much more coming your way, so stay tuned. You don't want to miss a bit of it. Mike Ferris is going to be joining us to discuss the Johnson Amendment. This is a major, massive issue. We'll be right back.
Are you a Christian parent looking to raise a spiritual champion in today's culture? Renowned author George Barna has written a new book, Raising Spiritual Champions. This book offers valuable insights based on extensive research conducted by George Barna, the Family Research Council, and Arizona Christian University. Learn how to help your children discern biblical truth and find compelling meaning and purpose. Don't miss out on this essential resource for parents. Order your copy today.
Hello, I'm Jody Hice, president of FRC Action. Here in America, we thank God for the right to vote, and we can all agree on the importance of this upcoming election. Many of us want to support candidates who share our values, but we're not comfortable supporting the big national political organizations. Well, we have a solution for supporting candidates through FRC Action's Faith, Family, and Freedom Fund. Being a super PAC, It allows for unlimited individual and corporate donations, so we can endorse and fund campaigns for people who share our values. By giving to this fund, we're able to pull all of our contributions together and support and endorse like-minded candidates. That's how we move the needle. So let's be the best stewards possible and get the most out of our political contributions by uniting our efforts. For more information or to contribute, visit faithfamilyfreedomfund.org. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Washington Watch. I'm your host, Jody Heiss, filling in today for Tony. Thank you so much for joining us. I think probably most of you know that before joining the FRC team, I served in Congress for 8 years, representing Georgia's 10th Congressional District. But prior to that, some of you may not know that I was a pastor for almost 30 years. And it was during that time that I personally encountered a conflict with what is known as the Johnson Amendment. And I ended up being one of 33 pastors across the country who challenged the Johnson Amendment, and one thing led to another, and that effectively is how I ended up going to Congress. But the Johnson Amendment is a provision in the U.S. tax code that effectively muzzles nonprofits, including churches. It, in essence, censors through intimidation what can and cannot be said from the pulpits for fear of potentially losing tax-exempt status or being sued or something to the like. I will say that during my time in Congress, twice we were able to get a repeal of the Johnson Amendment passed in the House of Representatives. Unfortunately, it failed both times in the Senate. And I readily admit the single biggest heartbreak and disappointment for me personally in leaving Congress was not being able to get that across the finish line, a repeal of the Johnson Amendment. But now the fight continues. Just yesterday, the nation's largest association of Christian communicators, NRB, stepped into the ring. And now joining me to talk about this by phone, we're having a little trouble with the video portion, but at least by phone, is Mike Ferris. He's the general counsel for the National Religious Broadcasters Association, as I mentioned, also known as NRB. Mike, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jody. Sorry about the video. I wish it was there.
Hey, well, I wish it was there too, but listen, I'm just glad you're here. You are one of the champions on all of this. And so let's just start with it. There may be some people out there, I shared a little bit about it, but lay out for us, if you would, the Johnson Amendment in a little bit more detail.
Sure. Lyndon Johnson in 1954 was a U.S. Senator running for re-election. Didn't like the fact that some nonprofits in Texas were supporting his opponent in the primary election. And so he got Congress to insert into the Internal Revenue Code a provision that says nonprofits can't say what they want to say about candidates. Now, ironically, about 2 weeks later, after Congress passed it. He got a pastor of a Protestant church in Texas to circulate to all the Protestant churches in Texas that Lyndon Johnson was a good Christian man and running against a Catholic, and they should support the Protestant over the Catholic. So he violated the Johnson Amendment in his own campaign about 2 weeks later. But nonetheless, it is a muzzle on churches. We wouldn't have the First Amendment if the churches in Virginia hadn't been able to convince James Madison to support a Bill of Rights. That's where it came from, is the Baptist churches in Orange County and surrounding areas told James Madison, you want our votes, you better support a Bill of Rights. And so they were able to get that from him. And so we're trying to reinstate the original vision of America where churches could preach the whole counsel of the Word of God and not stop at applying that to the issues that are facing us today. We think that churches and other nonprofits should be able to free to say whatever they want to say.
Absolutely, and thank you 1,000 times over for leading the charge on this at this point. I believe this is one of the reasons why so many churches are not engaged. So many pastors, as a result, so many Christians across the board are not engaged. They have been led to believe this erroneous narrative of separation of church and state, that you cannot, as a church or as a pastor from the Scripture, deal with biblical truth that touches on, in fact, directly at sometimes, deals with political issues, that somehow that's illegal. It is not illegal, and that is the heart, the hub, the centerpiece of our First Amendment rights. Can you tell us a little bit about the complaint that was filed yesterday?
Sure. It's over 50 pages long, and what we detail in it is the massive number of nonprofit newspapers and Democrat-leaning churches that openly violate the Johnson Amendment on a regular basis. Philadelphia Inquirer, one of the largest newspapers in the country, is a nonprofit newspaper. It regularly endorses a full slate of Democrat candidates. Now, we make it very clear in the case. We think they have the constitutional right to do that. We think that the churches that are having Kamala Harris and have had Joe Biden and have Barack Obama, we think they have the right to do that. But we don't think it's a one-way right. We think it should be available and free for everybody. And so the pattern of discriminatory enforcement by the IRS is really prevalent, and it takes up a whole lot of the complaint. So we go in great detail, and we're contending that the IRS is not only is the law, just as it's written, a violation of free speech, but as enforced, it's discrimination and a denial of equal protection. So we're going after every possible constitutional angle, and we feel real good about our chances in the long run.
That sounds like a very, very sound strategy. And look, it would appear to me, but as a pastor, I used to receive threatening letters every election cycle. And so it sounds as though there's a potential in this upcoming election for the Johnson Amendment to be used as a weapon again. So what would you say to pastors and nonprofit leaders who might be tuning into this broadcast right now?
Well, first of all, they can say whatever they want to say about issues all day long, every day, and never be in violation of the Johnson Amendment. The only time that they're in violation of the Johnson Amendment is if they connect it to a candidate and say this candidate is good or this candidate is bad on this issue. If you go to the point of supporting or opposing a candidate, you're risking the IRS coming after you. However, we think that that's constitutionally protected, and we're representing two brave churches, Sand Spring Church from near Tyler, Texas, and First Baptist Wascom, Texas, are our church plaintiffs, and then Intercessors for America and National Religious Broadcasters. Those are our four clients in the case, and we're contending we have the right to speak up, and we want people to speak up and stand up for what's right.
Thank you so much, Mike Ferris, General Counsel for this case with the National Religious Broadcasters Association. And we will be keeping a pulse on this and look forward to hearing great results and outcomes. Thanks for joining us today on Washington Watch. We appreciate it. All right, after the break, we've got much more coming your way. National Marriage Week. Yes. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Good afternoon, and welcome back to this edition of Washington Watch. I'm your host, Jody Heiss, and we are thrilled to have you with us this afternoon. All right, God's Word tells us in various places, but I think of Hebrews 13:4, where it just boldly says that marriage should be honored by all. And as we know, good marriages are the bedrock of a strong culture, a strong society. In fact, there are many credible studies that tell us that strong marriages have healthier, wealthier, stronger families where the children thrive. And that is certainly worthy of honor. And to that end, I want to encourage you to mark your calendar for February 7th through the 14th. This is going to be referred to as National Marriage Week. That's February 7th through 14th. And it's a time where we can all celebrate the beauty of marriage as God intended. And hopefully we'll see half the states in America and more proclaim that week for marriage. So that's what my next guest is all about. He's working to make that happen. Joining me now is Jerry Angelo. He's the founder and president, CEO of Vanguard Marriage and Family Advocates. Jerry, welcome to Washington Watch.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thank you, Pastor and Congressman Heiss, for your service to our country and God's people. And thanks to Tony and the team for having me on the show today. We've been so excited for this.
Well, listen, we are honored to have you on and just so grateful for your role in moving this forward. You know, I think a lot of times a marriage issue these days kind of gets buried beneath a lot of, well, we can't anymore stand for this or that and the others, as though biblical marriage no longer matters. But it does matter, and you're carrying the water for that. Tell us about your marriage initiative.
Sure. So I'm with the Vanguard Marriage and Family Advocates, and we focus on marriage, prayer, leadership, and events. And this particular narrative of the National Marriage Week that is coming up in February 7th through the 14th, we are doing a push for all the governors in the United States of America to sign on to our movement for a healthy marriage proclamation. And basically, we just want to proclaim the benefits of marriage to everyone across the land, because just like you said in Hebrews 13:4, that marriage should be honored by all, and it's because it benefits everyone. So healthy marriages in a society will benefit the society, whether you're married or not. That's why it's worthy of honor, like you said. And so we're just trying to get that narrative out there, and it's kind of a first step of letting people know what the benefits of marriage are and how that can help our culture and how it can help not only our marriages, but our children and our families and our churches and our cities. And it just goes on from there. And I don't know if you know this or not, but there was a study done on marital wellness in business. And for every dollar that was invested in a company's marital wellness, those companies were seeing $3, $4, $6, $7 of return on that investment on their company's bottom line. And so it would do well for us to learn how to have strong marriages and families. And so these marriage proclamations, we're doing them, like I said, to get the narrative out, to see if we can get local congressmen, elected officials, governors to sign on to these marriage proclamations and just help us get the word out so that we can start doing the work on this.
What a great initiative. How many do you have so far signed up, and how many do you realistically anticipate that maybe will come on board?
Sure. The very first time I did it, it was like they said, "Hey, can you help us with this?" The leadership at National Marriage Week, and we were like, "Sure." We got like one, and it was like just a few weeks out. So we got my home state of Missouri, and then this last February, we got 5 states to sign on. We got Secretary of State Ashcroft in our home state of Missouri did it. We had like a half a dozen local county commissioners doing it. Governor Stitt of Oklahoma signed one, and he gave us a great interview on Bott Radio Network. Governor Abbott of Texas helped us out. Governor Youngkin, Governor Reeves of Mississippi. So we got about 5 this year. I'm hoping to at least double or quadruple that number because we're getting a lot of good responses from that. So if there's some governors out there that want to honor the Lord and honor marriage, then we would love for them to contact us at marriageminute.org or maybe contact you guys at the show to reach out and get in touch with us. So it's pretty exciting. Everybody is very encouraging on this. So yeah, I'd love to see that double, maybe 8 or 10 or 20 governors by next February. That'd be amazing.
It would. So what are people going to see when they go to the website? What are they going to see that might help them encourage their state legislators and governors to get on board?
Sure. So if you go to marriageminute.org and you click on the proclamations, we actually have sample proclamations out there for different venues. So if you're a pastor of a church, I've got one that's for your church. So you can have a pastor from the pulpit take a stand, maybe do a message and say, "Hey, marriage is important and we need to do something about that in our community." And we also have ones for folks in the county commission if they want to do that at a county level. And then we also have one at the state level for governors to sign or anybody on the cabinet. So when they go to our website, not only are you going to see the proclamations examples that you can download and modify, but we also have some free resources there from various other ministries and also some messages that we have. And so we want to strengthen and encourage marriage and family, and these proclamations are just one way that we're doing it, but we have a wealth of so many other tools there as well.
Well, I've been there myself, and the proclamations are great. One more time, give out that website.
Sure. MarriageMinute.org. We'd love to hear from you and see how we can help you. We'll work with you, pastors, legislators. We're also working on some Missouri Covenant Marriage Act in Missouri. We're doing a lot of things, and we love the Lord, and we give him all the credit. And we'll work with anybody that wants to encourage marriage and family.
Thank you, Jerry Angelo with Vanguard Marriage and Family Advocates. Thank you for joining us on Washington Watch. All right, friends, don't go anywhere. Much more coming your way. This next segment about Mark Zuckerberg, boy, his letter from this week continues to make waves. We'll talk in depth about it right after the break.
Join us October 3rd through the 6th as we gather with spiritually active, governance-engaged conservatives from across America at the Pray, Vote, Stand Summit in Washington, D.C. We'll pray for our nation, engage in government and culture, and stand for biblical truth alongside Christian leaders, worldview experts, and government officials. We'll discuss important issues like the sanctity of life, religious freedom, protecting students, strengthening families, praying for our nation, and how you can impact America's future from a biblical worldview. Our nation stands at a critical juncture, and we must ensure that the issues impacting faith, family, and freedom are understood and advanced. Register now at PrayVoteStand.org. That's PrayVoteStand.org.
Jesus said in John 15, "These things I've spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full." In 2024, in these divided and uncertain times, how can this be possible? By abiding in Him through His Word. At Family Research Council, we want to help you do that, which is the reason for the Stand on the Word Bible reading plan. In just 10 to 15 minutes each day, you will have read the entire Bible in just 2 years. But more importantly, you will be abiding in Him daily. Find our Bible reading plan at frc.org/Bible. And join Tony Perkins each weekday for a 10-minute devotional inspired by the daily reading and designed to encourage you on this journey through the Bible. Listen on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. And remember, the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever.
Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these sage cons yourself, join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Washington Watch. I'm Jody Heiss, and we are glad to have you. And by just a way of reminder, don't forget our very important and informative Pray, Vote, Stand Summit is just around the corner. It's going to be taking place in Washington, D.C. on October 3rd through the 6th, and we would love to have you come join us. You can get more information. You can even register right now today by visiting the website prayvotestand.org. So we encourage you to do that right away, prayvotestand.org, and get more information. And we sure look forward to seeing you on October the 3rd. Also, I want to again announce to you in reference to our 2024 election survey. This is FRC's election survey. It's all about us hearing from you. It just gives us greater impact and influence and momentum as we declare what is most important to SageCons, to Christians, to people who are spiritually active and governance engaged. So we encourage you to go to our survey. Let us know what are the most important issues to you in this election cycle. You can fill out the survey by going simply texting the word election to 67742. That's election to 67742. All right, the fallout continues, and I think for some of us it's kind of remarkable and deeply encouraging that this fallout over Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg is still sending shockwaves. He sent this letter regarding the pressure that he and his company received from the Biden administration to censor speech that didn't fit the administration's narrative or cause. Now, while so much of the attention in all of this has been given to how Facebook put their thumb on the scale when it came to the 2020 elections, the impact that the Biden administration's pressure had on our country's approach to COVID should not be lost in this whole debate and discussion and investigation, especially when we have bureaucrats like we have at the World Health Organization who are just itching to have more control over our lives with any future pandemic that might just happen be right around the corner. So now that the cat's out of the bag, the question is whether or not we're going to be any wiser moving forward. And joining me now to talk about this is Dr. Bhattacharya. He's a professor of health policy at Stanford University and one of the authors behind the 2020 Great Barrington Declaration, which advocated for alternative approaches to COVID-19. Dr. Bhattacharya, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always an honor to have you, sir.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, you were unquestionably one of those who was on the tip of the spear in many ways during the pandemic. And you were saying things that other people like Dr. Fauci were frankly trying to shut down. Remind us of what we saw social media platforms doing during that pandemic.
So I wrote that Great Barrington Declaration with other authors from Harvard and Oxford. Tens of thousands of doctors and epidemiologists signed it. When we put the petition online, Facebook and Google both suppressed it. Like you couldn't post it. Google downplayed the rankings of it. Later, when I joined Twitter in 2021, I was put on a blacklist, which I found out when Elon Musk bought Twitter. And in the Missouri versus Biden court case that I'm a plaintiff in, the discovery in that showed direct emails from the White House itself, the Surgeon General's office, the CDC, to Facebook, ordering them effectively to censor my ideas, or ideas like what I would like to be put out.
Incredible. And so many of us during that time, I know we were hit with it. We were not on the tip of the spear to the extent you were, but we were shut down, and many of us. And, you look at this, censoring speech in and of itself is horrifying and is bad enough and is un-American. But when silencing speech that could have been helpful during the pandemic is shut down, that even goes another step, don't you think?
Oh, Jody, it was terrible. It wasn't just me, of course, that was shut down. It was, as you said, millions of Americans were shut down. They tried to create this illusion that there was consensus behind the school closures, consensus behind the mask mandates, consensus behind the vaccine mandates, consensus there were no such thing as vaccine injuries, that the vaccine was effective at stopping you from getting and spreading COVID. Lie after lie after lie. That was the center of government policy, and the censorship industrial complex, the whole censorship machine that the Biden administration used, was designed to cement in place those crazy policies. All the harm that came from those policies might have been avoided had we allowed to have free speech in those critical moments in 2020 and 2021.
Well, I'd like to bring up a couple of comments here and get your reaction to this. In response to Zuckerberg's letter that is continuing to make all the waves it is, the White House issued a statement of their own. And I'd like to get your response to some of this. First of all, they said, quote, when confronted with a deadly pandemic, this administration encouraged responsible actions to protect public health and safety. Okay, your response to that.
The administration got nearly everything wrong. They kept schools closed for a full year longer than our European counterparts, where there was already evidence that it was useless for controlling COVID and really deeply harmful to our kids. They enforced mask mandates when there was very little good evidence that they were going to be effective, and divided the population on the basis of that. They imposed vaccine mandates where million people lost their jobs over vaccine mandates. Really changed the way the working class connected with public health, damaging vaccine confidence. The White House statement has it exactly backwards. They got public health wrong, and they needed the censorship of scientific debate in order to create this illusion that they were right when they weren't. They were scared of speech. Just to put it really fast, really short way, free speech is good for health. And when you take away free speech, you get bad outcomes in health.
Yes, that's a strong point, because when the free speech was taken away, also some medications that were seemingly very helpful were taken away. That all of it became politicized. Here's another statement from the White House that I again like to get your reaction to. They said, quote, our position has been clear and consistent. We believe tech companies and other private actors should take into account the effects their actions have on the American people while making independent choices about the information they present, end quote. All right, it sounds to me like the White House is saying that the Biden administration really knows what's better, and that they had to step in because they know. Did they know what's best? Did, even for that matter, did the big tech know what's best?
No, I mean, no. The answer is no to both those questions, Jody. But the thing is that is such a deceptive little piece of propaganda there. What they're saying is that the Twitter and Facebook and all that should make responsible judgments what belongs online and what doesn't belong online. To some extent, that's fine. Of course, they shouldn't have child porn and other kind of illegal material online. That's completely legitimate that would be restricted. But they are under a law called the Communication Decencies Act. Section 230 of that act basically says that they can't act as editors, that they're essentially a conduit for free speech. And if they act like editors, then they're liable for all the slander or whatever it gets said on their platforms. What the White House is saying is that you should act like an editor, and put them really in a conundrum. If they act like an editor, then all of a sudden they're liable for all the terrible stuff that they post that are lies. It's online, so that you're going to have some of that. If they don't act like an editor, if they act like a free speech platform, then they get absolutely hammered by the White House. It wasn't voluntary action by the White House that led to these restrictions. It was pressure by the White House. A federal judge looking at this evidence made an analogy to Al Capone, with Biden administration and the Al Capone role coming to the Facebook and Twitter saying, "Look, that's a nice business you got there. It'd be nasty if something were to happen to it." Wow.
Yeah, a little hint, hint, wink, wink. You better do as you're told, or else. There are so many areas that was deceptive, misguiding, outright wrong. But one set of voices that was shut down in the midst of all these others we're talking about was the origins of COVID. And I mean, you couldn't, no one could talk about where this came from. How does that fit into the White House's claim that they were somehow doing everything they could to protect public safety and health?
Okay, so the thing about COVID origins, the people who had an interest in suppressing it were actually a relatively small group of very powerful scientists, including Tony Fauci, because the allegation essentially is that Tony Fauci and the NIH funded the kind of research in Wuhan that very likely caused the pandemic, leading to the deaths of millions and trillions of dollars spent on the damage caused by the lockdowns, school closures, all this harm. If it's true that this funding, this decision to fund dangerous research really led to the pandemic, well, that's going to damage the reputations of Tony Fauci and others in the scientific community that would participate in it forever. And so if you look at the early days of the pandemic, January 2020, those folks spent the early days trying to cover up the possibility of a lab leak. And they deployed their resources and power within the media and in social media to try to make it seem as if the lab leak idea was a conspiracy, that if you were somehow racist against the Chinese if you believed in the lab leak. And it wasn't a conspiracy. It was a real theory, a reality, and very likely true, that the United States funded the Wuhan lab that very likely did the dangerous research that led to the pandemic. That's true. That's 100% true. It's documented and true that what I just said. It was a reputational protection of a very small number of very powerful scientific bureaucrats that was at stake here. And it's striking to me that to this day, you still have a full political party, the Democratic Party, trying to protect the reputation of Tony Fauci. And I don't understand it. It's not a partisan thing. It's just a human thing.
Yeah, I mean, hearing what you're talking about, it just, to me, it demands more investigation. There has to be more than just protect a reputation. At least you would think so. All right, so let's go back to Zuckerberg here and the letter he sent. How does this letter potentially affect the court case that you're a part of?
Well, actually, the court case, the discovery in that court case had found almost everything that's in the letter. In fact, the federal judges in the lower court, the appeals court, all looked at this evidentiary record that we developed in this Missouri versus Biden case and issued a preliminary injunction ordering the Biden administration to stop censoring social media content and basically stop contacting social media companies with the purpose of censoring. The case went to the Supreme Court where we lost on standing, which means that apparently what the Supreme Court requires is an email from a government hack down to a social media company saying, censor Jay. We don't have such emails. What we have is the White House emails the social media companies saying, censor ideas sort of like this, which is the kind of ideas I would say. And in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that we don't have standing because the government was censoring ideas, not people. So the case went back down to the lower court. We no longer have the preliminary injunction in place, but we're going to get a chance to prove that we do actually have standing. As things stand, actually, I'm sorry to say, Jody, the First Amendment is a dead letter in the United States. If the government can go and censor ideas on social media without anybody having standing, well, what purpose does this First Amendment serve? It is an unenforceable dead letter. There is some action in Congress to sort of fix this loophole, but the Supreme Court really messed up here. And the Biden administration, it's the worst administration on free speech in American history.
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
John Adams is worse.
Where do ideas come from? What do people embrace if it's not ideas? I mean, how do you separate ideas from people and thereby judicially separate ideas from those who have standing? Unbelievable. Listen, our time is rapidly getting away from us, and I hate that. But you were one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. Wouldn't our nation have benefited tremendously from considering even some of what you were proposing and others?
I mean, I can make a
you were
theoretical
silenced.
argument.
Yeah.
I mean, it was silent. I mean, I can make a theoretical argument about Jody, but it's very, very simple. Look what happened in Sweden. Sweden did not lock down. They didn't close schools for kids under 16. They had voluntary measures to try to protect vulnerable older people. You know, they made some mistakes early in the pandemic, but by and large, what happened is that they protected human life better than any other country in Europe. Better than the United States, better than Canada, better than any country in South America. The Swedish approach, which is very close in spirit to the Great Barrington Declaration, which is protect the vulnerable older people who are most at risk, but then allow the rest of society to go on without draconian measures to try to and futile measures to try to suppress the spread of it. That protects human life best, and that's what we found in Sweden. Even from the United States, you can see Florida had lower all-cause excess deaths since the start of the pandemic than California has. I mean,
and they had the senior population.
Yeah, even if you do the age adjustment, I mean, the key thing is the lockdowns were harmful. The lockdowns killed, and they did not protect human life against COVID.
Well, listen, I wish we could talk more. I'd like to know what your thoughts are. What are other issues that science is, that experts' voices need to be heard that are not being heard right now? How confident are you that we've learned lessons from the past? I only got about 30 seconds. Do you want to reply, or let's just save it for next time?
I mean, no. Well, I mean, just very quickly, the COVID pandemic pointed to very, very severe problems in the way we manage public health, the way we manage and fund science. The key thing is we need radical transparency, and we need checks and balances on public health,
Absolutely.
and we need decentralization. Basic American ideas have to be restored to restore public health to where it should be.
Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, thank you so much, Professor of Health and Policy at Stanford University. We are so grateful for you. All right, friends, that wraps up this edition. We'll see you tomorrow right here on Washington Watch.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com.